What's up, guys? Today we are going to talk about back training. Now, when it comes to training the back, I think a lot of people just go into the gym and they do their rows and they do their pull downs and they just hope for the best. They hope they're going to get that overall well-balanced development that they're looking for. Unfortunately, the back is pretty complex. There's a lot of muscles, each of them with their own function, and a lot of them are overlapping. And so if you're looking to actually target development, whether that's building more width or that's building more thickness, whether it's your upper back or your lower back, you kind of have to understand what's going on here, what each of those muscles are, what you're doing when you're doing a lot of these exercises in order to know how to target the development that you're looking for. So I brought Bones out here to the gym like usual, so I can show you guys what some of these muscles are and what their function is, and I think that's going to help you better understand how to apply that in the gym and get that targeted development that you're looking for. So let's start by talking about a muscle that I think is really misunderstood, and that's your trapezius or your traps. Now, everybody knows that your traps are up here, and that's going to help you shrug your shoulders up. And if you were to ask most people, what do you do for traps? They're going to say, well, I do shrugs, or maybe I do some upright rows. But that's only one part of what your traps do. Your traps are actually divided into three sections. There's going to be the superior bundle, which is the one that you know about. So what does that do? Well, that originates under the skull here and attaches to the scapula. And that's what creates that nice triangle shape with your traps. And so as this muscle shortens, as it pulls, it's going to pull on your scapula, and that's what's going to elevate your shoulders like that. So we all know what the upper traps do and how to train them. But now there's also what's called the medial or the middle section of your traps, and also the inferior or the lower portion of your traps. Now the traps are called traps because supposedly they look like a trapezoid. I don't think they look like a trapezoid. They look like a diamond to me. And that's because they start here, they fan out, and then they come back down like this. So it looks like a big giant diamond. The middle section though is a small triangle section that looks like this. And as the middle section shortens, well, they're gonna pull your scapula in towards the middle. They're gonna squeeze your shoulder blades back. So anytime you're doing any of your rows, especially if you're doing high rows versus towards your waist, you're pulling your shoulder blades back. Even in a lat pull down, you're pulling your shoulder blades back at the same time. So that's gonna be the middle section of your trapezius. So the lower section, again, has different angles. They're almost the exact opposite of your upper section, and instead of going up, these are all going down, pulling your scapula down. So when do you pull your scapula down? Well, in a neutral position, you can't. But when your arms are above you, if you're doing, say, a lat pull down, that's what's going to initiate that first bit of range of motion. If I were to turn around and you can see, that's going to be my lower traps that are pulling my scapula or my shoulder blades down. So when people are talking about trying to target development and they're talking about, I want to develop more thickness in my back, it really comes down to knowing which muscles do what. Because your lats, which we'll talk about next, help develop width because they are a wide muscle, but they're not thick. And you're not going to develop thickness in your back by developing your lats. You're going to develop width or those wings. But if you want to develop thickness, one of the primary muscles you need to work on and focus on is going to be your trapezius or your traps. And that's some of these other movements besides just doing shrugs. So let's move on to lats. Everyone knows about your lats, and you know that if you do lat pull downs, of course they're called lat pull downs for a reason. If you do lat pull downs, you're going to work your lats. So what do your lats do, and what do they look like? Well, again, we have to know what the muscle fibers, the direction they're running, what they look like, where they insert, where they originate. So they're going to insert right underneath the humerus, and that's what's going to help pull your arm down. Now your lats are actually kind of almost triangular shaped. They start off wide and they come in narrow. So what do your lats do? Well, if I were to shorten this muscle, contract this muscle, that's going to pull my arm down towards my side, just like this, which is going to be in a lat pull down. If my elbows are out wide and I'm pulling them down towards my sides, that's going to be my lats. Well, what else do your lats do? If I spin Bones sideways here, If my arm is out in front of me and if I were to contract this muscle, it's going to shorten and it's going to pull my arm down and towards my side. And that's called shoulder flexion, which looks just like this. So if I were to do a pull like this with a reverse grip, that right there is shoulder flexion. My arm, my humerus is coming down towards my side. So that too is going to be working your lats. Now here's where it gets a little confusing. Everyone talks about you do pull downs to build width and you do rows to build thickness. Not always the case. If I come over here and if I were to do a dumbbell row and I were to pull backwards like this, you can see I'm getting that shoulder flexion. I'm pulling my arm back and doing a pretty good job targeting your lats. Now, if I were to go ahead and I were to pull high, that's going to be a lot of retraction in my scapula or my shoulder blades. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to be engaging my trapezius, as well as the infraspinatus and also your rear delt. So let's talk about the infraspinatus real quick, because that is really that gap between your traps and your rear delts. So how do you train that? Well, it's going to be the same way that you train your rear delts, and that's going to be any of your reverse flies. So that's why training rear delts is important, not just for developing the back of your shoulder, but also to get that overall development in your back. What else does that leave us? Well, here's one of the tricky things. Have you guys ever heard the term high lats before? Now, this is something that I thought I suffered from. I thought it was like, some sort of condition, genetic condition that limited me from having full development in my lats all the way down low. It just felt like all my development was really up high, and everyone said, well, you've got short lats. Well, it's usually not because of the length of your lats or the insertion points of your lats. Most of the time, that lack of development is a lack of mind-muscle connection and really learning how to target and feel that muscle. So what is preventing us from really targeting that muscle? Well, that's one other muscle that's getting in our way, and that's called our Teres Major. Now, you remember just a minute ago I talked about the lats inserting here under the humerus. Well, guess what? The Teres Major inserts in almost the identical spot, but instead of originating over here, it's originating right off of your scapula. So what is your Teres Major responsible for? Well, I bet you can take a guess, and if you guess pulling your arm down towards your side and shoulder flexion pulling your arm back, then you'd be 100% correct. The exact same function of your lats. Now, this muscle may be smaller, but make no mistake about it, this muscle is still very strong and very powerful, and it's easy, depending on how you've trained through the years, to engage this muscle more than you should be, and that's why you're not getting as much targeted contraction in your lats. And that's a mind-muscle thing. So that's learning how to really feel a muscle, and that's one of the things that I can't really teach you guys. I can talk about this, and that's my ultimate goal for all these videos. It's not to say that compound movements versus light weights, that one is better than the other, but the way that I like to train is targeted muscle growth. I want to put muscle exactly where I want to put muscle on my body. I don't just want to do a movement and hope for the best and hope that my weak areas somehow get stronger, because usually that's not the case. Usually your stronger, more dominant areas become more dominant and your weaker areas continue to stay weak. So if you want to bring up weak areas, you have to learn how to target. So any of these people that want to debate and say, well, hey, if you want to build mass, that's the way to do it. I'm not just talking about building mass. I'm talking about targeted muscle development. I'm talking about sculpting and shaping your physique the way you want to sculpt it and shape it. So if that's the case, you have to understand what each of these muscles does in order to learn how to target them. And if you understand how they work, it gives you a better idea to be able to visualize it, and that's going to help you develop that mind-muscle connection. But let me leave you with this. All these muscles are designed to work in concert together, so it's impossible to truly isolate any of these muscles. They are all going to work at the exact same time. Even in a lat pull down, I can't isolate my Teres Major from my lats, and I can't keep my traps from contracting, and I can't keep the lower traps from pulling my scapula down. I can't keep my infraspinatus and my rear delts from becoming engaged in my rows. It's going to happen. So the key is learning how, like I said, I'll say it again, that mind-muscle connection, so you can feel the muscle and you can go ahead and target it and better isolate it and engage those other muscles less, especially if one of those muscles is more dominant. So that's the basics. I think the only thing that I forgot is going to be your spinal erectors, and what those muscles do is they run along the spine, and that's what's going to, if you were to curl your spine forward, if I were to bend forward like this, not straight, because straight as I lift up is going to be my hamstrings and glutes, but if I were to straighten up like that, that's my spinal erectors. They do the opposite of what your abs do. Your abs curl your spine forward, and they straighten and hyperextend your back. So when you're doing deadlifts, for example, they are working isometrically to hold your body posture and to keep your back straight. So recap real quick. Your trapezius in the middle is going to give you that thickness in your middle and low back. Your spinal erectors are going to give you that thickness in the lower portion of your back. Your teres major and your lats are going to give you that width, and your rear delts and your infraspinatus are going to give you that thickness and that development in the back of your upper shoulder. So that's back in a nutshell. As you can see, there's a lot of things going on. So in this next video, I'm going to go ahead and break it down, and I'll give you guys some specific exercises and techniques that you can do to start learning how to target / isolate, even though you can't isolate, each of these muscle groups. And then in the following video, if you guys wait for that, I'll do what I always do with all my videos after we break down kind of like the scientific nerdy stuff here, all the anatomy. Then we'll just come into the gym and I'll show you my exercise selection sets and reps. So that's it for now, and I will see you guys next video.